All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my apologies for some reason in this room now we're having some technical issues, but I think we're getting things resolved here. Yeah. So in regards to the sound, I think the last in the performance, the first couple songs, there was no sound, but we got it sorted out. So, anyways, now we're going to do our interview, and as I mentioned, we're very lucky to have the wonderful and talented bassist and composer and educator Clipper Anderson with us. For those of you joining us, how this normally works, if you're new to the series here, we'll do the interview for about 45 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes we'll open things up for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I'll do my best to get to them here. And if we don't get to them in real time, of course you can do it just if you're watching this like tomorrow or the next week, put it in a comment, we'll get to it when we can. So anyways, Clipper, welcome. Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here today. Yeah. So you're an icon here in the Pacific Northwest, whether you want to accept it or not. You're a very, very talented, well-known bassist, and as I mentioned, great human being. For those that aren't familiar with you and your music, can you talk about where you grew up and how you got started playing music?
Okay. Let's see. Well, I was born into a musical family. Both my parents sang quite well. My mother, self-taught pianist. Played the stride style quite well, actually. My dad played ukulele and an odd double string kind of ukulele, actually called a tipple, and sang. And so I have two older brothers and one younger brother and sister. All of them are musical ability. And, somehow I got dubbed, I don't know how, I got dubbed as I'm going to be the musician. And it was, we had a wheezy old player piano, if you know what those are, player, and we had, nobody could really work the pedals very well, but I at 5, who was fascinated by the thing, at 5, as soon as I had figured out how to use use the pedals in a way to actually work the rolls better than anyone else in the family, so that I became the official player piano roll pumper. But I learned a lot of standards that way, and I still collect them. I have one that's not so easy that actually plays quite well, and I learned a lot of standards that way. But also my parents had. And I was really lucky because I'm in a cowboy town. I'm at the south end of Flathead Lake in Montana, Polson. And I happen to have been born in a family that listened to jazz. The Ellington, a lot of 78s, and nobody probably knows what I'm talking, 78s. Yeah. No,
I was born in 78, but that's a different 78.
See, the old records that were just one tune on each side. Ran but there happened to be a lot of jazz, even though there was some eclectic things but I seem to everybody sang, so I didn't think, oh well, that's covered, so I don't want to do that. So I wanted to play trumpet. They shoved me into French horn instead. There was a tyrant band director at the time. I actually didn't get discovered. I listened to. I guess I was sort of listening to bass parts, bass lines. I started collecting, recordings that had heavy bass in it, and I used to try to go out and buy these old amplifiers and get just giant vacuum tube amplifiers to get as much bass as I could get all the time. And I think my older brother, Rocky, who's the next older one, also, he kind of said, he was in a band for a brief period of time, and he said, oh, bass is really cool. You should check it out. And he took one of these old Stella acoustic guitars, and he strung it with actual bass strings. And so I don't know how that didn't just go, what? But it's still there. the thing is still there, and it's never the testament to the building of apparently of Stella guitars and whatever how old this poor guitar was, but it's still in one piece. But it doesn't. Let's say it doesn't fret quite so accurately. It's just like, you know. But I did actually kind of tried playing to songs, started playing bass parts to songs and stuff like this. So a lot of I did a lot by ear. I got into senior high school. They said, "Oh, you can be in the big band because we got electric bass and an amp." And it was one of my best friends in there. He said, "Well, you told me you like to play bass, so you just play." I couldn't read any bass clef. I was a French horn player, so they gave me the records. They had these sample records for the things they did, and I just memorized the bass parts off the records and never read anything that first year. So, and I just kind of slid into college that way. I just got into the big bands and got the right people. The band director I had in Norm Brunken when I was in high school, and Lance Boyd, who was the director of jazz and trombone instructor or low brass. They both gave me a boost said, at the right time, when sometimes you get support from your parents, but you kind of take that, you sort of take it for granted. But if you get somebody that you respect, and somebody they take you aside and go, you could actually do this you could do this. You should consider this. And I got that at the right time, at probably a key moments in my life, from both of them at the right time. Who knows? I'd be a train conductor. I have no idea what I would have been.
Well, I want to back up a little bit because that's a lot of ground, jumping from like beginning to college, and this is all wonderful. So you said your parents had a bunch of jazz in the house. Was that something that you enjoyed listening to, or were you into other things as well?
Well, the thing is that I did, and it's weird. It's weird because, so here's an example, because both my younger brother and my sister, maybe my sister is more than the brother, but we would make little kazoos, or they had things along where we'd play along with some recordings that we'd like that were cool. Now, and one of those recordings was Ella Fitzgerald's version of "Lady Be Good," which has one of the best scat solos probably ever. And it's like, and it would happen to be in a collection of an album that had the best of a certain particular year, and it happened to be and it was on there. Well, we for some reason decided we wanted to learn that. We wanted to learn what she was doing. So, at one point, we were kids. We had memorized that whole scat solo. We could do it verbatim, and we'd put it on there and go. Saying on. So we used to do that. So. And I even did that later on. I did that with a Paul Desmond tune that was on my brother. It was on a fairly obscure album of the Dave Brubeck Quartet that I think featured, but it had a tune called "Over and Over Again." I think it's a Richard Rodgers, but
Say it over and over again?
no, it's a different one. That's it. It's just called "Over and Over Again." It's a waltz. But I love the sax solo on it, so I just kept whittling at it. It's just like, and so it's another one and when I did my recording, I actually relearned it, and recorded it on my first album with Origin.
Before I forget, this is jumping completely far away from your upbringing. You're also a very talented vocalist, and some people know this, some people don't. And you're one of the only people that I know personally that can sing and play bass lines and do both incredibly well. How did you start developing that?
Well, it's actually a daily fight. It's like I'd rather have my OCD brain on one or the other, but I like the challenge of it. I have to kind of, there's a bit of give and take, compromise between the two. and it's actually something I have to actually routinely do. If I don't do it for a while, then it's like, oh, I've got to get you. I got to find that space again. And because the bass, everything caused me the phrase a little differently, and then, but when I did the second album is my vocal album that from Origin that when I did I actually hired, well, it was Chuck Deerdorf. I actually hired him to play behind me with the regular group, Mark and Darren, and I did the album release, and that was, oh my God, you know, it's like I was able to just kind of just sit there and not have to, because Chuck was just nailing all the parts, and it was like, oh, I don't know if I could go back.
Well, and for people that don't, I mean, a lot of the musicians watching understand what you're talking about, but for people that don't know, your albums are out on Origin Records. That's the record label here in Seattle. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to your education, so you had your parents, and at what age, fairly young, when you started doing all this stuff by ear, listening and doing recordings, and singing along, and
yeah, when we were kids, just basically it was one of those things we just did. I was camped out on the record players that were when they were working a lot. In fact, when I remember the one I had was using it when it just completely wore out. I was just, I gotta find one. I need a photograph. I need a photograph now. I was seriously had a withdrawal from it. You know, it was like I'm going, please, someone find another anywhere, you know. But
so then school band, French horn.
Yeah.
High school is where the bass started to come in, and it was electric bass first, not
yeah,
acoustic.
it was, and I went into I picked up the acoustic, urging from my college band director. He's saying, well, I really want to hear string bass on this one thing. And I had the only thing access to me was the school basses, and they were notoriously, well, either anyone that was playable was usually always unavailable, or they were terribly maintained. I had one with a bridge flew off about 5 feet. I played it, and it went pow. It just flew into the trombone section. It was like, well, sorry. You know, so, but yeah, so Ron Kuntz, who was he was a saxophone player, and he went to college with me and high school. He was somehow in Billings, and he knew a repairman that's a good repairman for horns. He happened to have 2 basses in his basement, and my friend goes, you have a couple of basses. You wouldn't be interested in selling one? And he goes, yeah, sure. And so he just called me and said, you're going to drive over to Billings and get this bass. Yeah. And I did. I think paid like $500, I think, and it was an Epiphone plywood, but Epiphone's are pretty nicely made, and so that was the first bass. But I think I got it. It was after 2 or 3 years of college. So mid-college, 76, 77 is when I started on it. And then that just changed everything. The electric kind of went, When the horn certainly went, oh.
Well, what I wanted to ask is earlier in education, besides the band programs, did you have any private instruction or anyone that was a mentor to you in terms of one-on-one time?
I didn't have a lot of private lessons on bass. Oh, there was I had a few lessons with the first chair, first band. I was in the second band. During that time, I took some lessons, and it's because it was weird because having no lessons, I played on electric. I played by just my thumb. I don't know why I didn't just pick up a pick. Would have been, because that would have been a nice extra thing to be able to do. There's some, especially when I was trying to do some music parts that really the bass part needed that attack. You can't really fake it with fingers, at least not easily. But I learned a thumb, and and I wasn't using two fingers like this, and so the first thing was like, you've got to get these going like this. This was on electric, but I just and I had one and a half years on classical bass, just to make sure I didn't start out with bad habits on hand position, just efficiency. And I highly recommend anyone if they haven't taken classical on bass, it's money well spent to get the discipline on that.
And not undoing bad habits later
Yeah,
on.
because if you see some players that have the thumb grab like they're grabbing a tree trunk, and it's going like this, or guitar players that are used to playing bar chords like this, even on electric, it's more efficient and a lot less danger of carpal tunnel when you have a radical action like that. So, anyway.
Well, I wanted to ask you, when you started, I mean, obviously I'm not going to dig into French horn because that, again, by the wayside. But when you started getting invested in the bass and that kind of took over, who were some of your initial influences that you really enjoyed on the bass?
Well, the first one that somebody turned me on was Stanley Clarke. That was that's a big jolt. Yeah. So it wasn't, I mean, when I was listening to whoever was playing on the old 78s and where I learned some walking lines and stuff. I suppose I don't know if there's anything that jumps out as far specifically. But when I got to college and I was playing, then that was Stanley Clarke was probably the first thing. And on some Ron Carter, I remember having a T-shirt for some reason that I wore around and had Ron Carter on the back. Sure. It's like, well, they're going to think your name's Ron Carter. Well, duh. So anyway, it didn't last too long. But as I started playing, I was playing sort of in a trio or that was from the jazz band. We started getting together just ourselves, and I think the drummer, who lives in the Seattle area, was Ray Davis. I went to school with him. Great, he was a really great drummer. He still is, but I think he turned me on to a bunch of different things. One of them being, let's see. Bill Evans. Well, he turned me to Bill Evans, so I didn't hear Scott LaFaro, but because he had later recordings, so I heard Eddie Gomez first. And that stuck. The whole thing, and that trio concept, that open conversation. That really, boom. That really stuck in my mind. But that, and then I had heard Scott LaFaro after that, very soon. So, and actually, another one that was, because somebody was playing this Oscar Peterson recording, and the bass player was like, was Niels Orsted Pedersen, and that N-Hop, and I just went, that was another one that flipped me. Yeah. This is another one where was I when I heard N-Hop? Yeah. Well, I was at this party after a jazz band thing. Somebody threw it on the thing and said, check this out. And I was like, you can do that? You can do, that was that, and the Jocko thing also, which I had mentioned before. That was another, where was it? Where were you? I can remember the moment where I was and who it was with that played it for me. So, so there was a number of, I suppose most of us have similar.
Yeah, no, it's interesting for me doing all these interviews to see how people came to these different conclusions to arrive where they are now. Going back to Montana, college in Montana, which college did you attend?
University of Montana in Missoula.
Okay.
In Missoula.
So then, when you were there, it sounded like they had a jazz program. Did they bring any
They had a
guest
good one.
artists that you were able to be around or get some information from?
Well, it's interesting. They had a few, but later they formulated a jazz festival as about the very few years after I graduated. They started doing a jazz festival, and it was just under the college's name, but and I did a couple, and then I did a few of those. I did a few of those when I was out of college. I was actually in Spokane. I did a few of those, and then when I was in. Then we get in with a steady trio, and happened to be my cousin, who played piano, excellent, also excellent classical piano, David Morganroth. He and I were there every year. We backed a small group set, and then they would play with the big band, with the students. But and then it began that they added a Buddy DeFranco, and then it became the Buddy DeFranco Festival. And we did that for like 20 some years. Okay. And so they were all guest artists the whole time. So it's a really pretty long list. Brecker was there.
Micheal Brecker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And Randy.
Okay.
With both of them. I remember they came in and their clothes didn't come. They basically played in the clothes that they came off the plane. I don't know if they ever found them or not, but didn't matter. They could have been naked. It didn't matter. It was like they just played their butt off. So. But,
Well, so working. Okay, let's talk about that. So working with Micheal and Randy Brecker, what was that experience like for you?
it's interesting. I played with Micheal twice, and the first time was not with, and that was in Spokane, and that was before. When I was in Spokane, we were doing we had a house band gig. One of the rare ones in Spokane had an unusually strong union, which no longer exists, or at least not as strong as it was. But with all the clubs and all the musicians were all in line. So we had this. So there were a lot of house band gigs that didn't move personnel. They were there forever. The loyalty was unusual there for that. It didn't exist in most towns. You know how it. Yeah. You show up a gig, you never know who's on the group. So, Micheal, it was interesting because he's very cool. He's a very cool guy. He's just a very cool guy. And the thing is, you think, oh God, this is a bucket list thing, right? And like, I'm gonna be nerved out. But the funny thing is that he doesn't. In both cases, he actually raises the group behind him to another level. Yeah. You're not nervous. You're actually. I don't know how that works. I don't know. It's just a presence thing. I can't quite. I've never been able to figure out how it worked like that. But I guess he was one of those people that actually bring a higher level out of you. Yeah. Just being.
Yeah. I understand. There's musicians that from time to time that I get to work with, and I feel very much the same way. So I know what you mean. I wanted to ask you, going back to high school, college, were there venues in Montana that you could go hear stuff and perform and play, or was it mostly just getting together with friends and playing, or any clubs that you could go play or hear musicians perform?
It's always there's some market to do that. Just basically because it's a fine arts college for one thing. It helps, but it was clubs I've always had would come and go. But it was tough. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's. Well, of course, since the pandemic, what might have been there in 2019, me and have still not recovered back. And I haven't checked on that scene. So, but there was, I mean, off and on, but not enough to. At least when in college, it was. We could play a few things. We could play a few things on campus. I figure there's something where we could get hired through the school and play, you know. But I don't know. Yeah, it was always frustrating. It was because I think they could support it. They could support that there's also things where they had a jazz club that was intending to be a jazz club, and then and they would actually be paying a decent rate, and then what happened is that all the other starved players would come in and undercut it, said we'll play for this, and there was no union or no way to put us to control that, and it always end up the club just folding very quickly. So,
Well, you said you had a regular trio during college when you were in that time frame.
yeah,
so who was the
most
personnel?
of it we just got together and just play. I mean, we got a few gigs, but most of the time we just got together and played, and just learned, just kept learning from whatever real book we could, or something. There's only the one. I think there was only the one at the time.
And which you couldn't purchase in the stores probably. It was some guy in an alley with a trench coat.
In a trunk of a car, Seriously, literally a trunk of a car. Right.
The first page is free, but the rest are going to cost you. Yeah.
No, they were like $35 or something. Then they were $50, and I don't remember. I guess it depend on the person selling them. But
Well, so going back to the festival, you said you worked at the festival as basically the house band for
the house rhythm section. Yeah.
It was for 20. You said 20 years.
20, at least 20, maybe more.
Okay.
I only missed about 2 or 3.
And so, tons of artists, and this is not a name-dropping thing, but let's go like maybe top 5 artists and what you gleaned from working with them and those experiences.
Buddy DeFranco was there every year, and Buddy was he was inspirational. He was even more as he got older, because I mean he was up there, and I remember even on the last year we did it, where he had had health issues in and out, wasn't sure he was going to make it. So at the rehearsal, it seemed like he was just, he was rehearsing with the headliners they brought in. It was always kind of, I actually waited because this would happen pretty much year after year. He'd be at the rehearsal and they're just running tunes, but he wouldn't really play much. And a lot of them were just kind of going, well, it's by Franco, but, not hearing, No, if you want to see an on switch, this is an on switch. He would get on the stage and click, and they would watch their expressions. They just like and not only that, but he could, his ears were so good he could take nuances out of their style and compliment it and go and just reference it. and it was just, it was one of my favorite things is to go, is when it's like, okay, when we were on stage, that tune we did rehearsal, not going to sound the same. As far as Buddy's concerned, that first solo, watch out. Don't think you're not going to be sleeping through this concert. I loved it. It was like, now that's an on switch. I love that. Just like all the stuff that happens during life and everything before you get on a stand, and you could just go. I mean, you may not feel like playing at the moment, but there's Bill Evans' interview that talks about the same thing about, I just can't do this. And then on stage, it's just like, whoop, it's just gone. The same thing. But no, we had lots of people.
Who else was playing with you in the house band or backing up?
Well, we had the drummers. We had a number of drummers. We had a little trouble with getting steady players.
This is kind of a loaded question because I know you and Mark, you were running mates for a long time, and I thought this extended that far back.
No, it didn't. No,
Okay.
I didn't until I moved to Spokane. I mean, I moved to Seattle in '81 from Montana, and I was only there like 6 months or so, and then I was subbing for Bob Bierman, who was a bass player that was working a lot, that had heard me or something, and he started making me as a sub for him. And he had a sub. He had a sub with, and Dave Peck was playing piano, but Mark was on drums. Okay. And I came in and did those, and they kept us. They kept. I never went back. I was like I was there, and they were doing guest spots on that. Yeah. So in that room. So, but that's where I first met Mark. So later in '81, when I did that Spokane, I ended up turned out to be a house band gig for about 10 years. Oh wow! 6 nights a week. Yeah. And the first 2 hours are trio. Okay. First 2 hours of trio, and you could play any. We were basically just sight reading. We play, so by the end of the 10 year run, we pretty much didn't have to look at anything, a lot of what was in that first reel, but it was one of those things where, wow, we're getting paid to play and learn tunes, and there was sometimes where there was people that were listening or not, but by and large, the rest of it turned into an R&B top 40 gig. Yeah. We added a vocalist and actually it was actually who just played bass, Rob Vaughn. Excellent vocalist, a guitar player. But anyway, that's when I met Mark. 81. That was a while ago.
You guys have been playing a lot together ever since. I mean, you guys are just like, thick as thieves.
He makes me sound sane. I don't know what else to say. He does. It's just like, oh, yeah. I don't have to. But, he's made me sound decent.
You guys sound pretty well together.
He sounds great.
Well, as far as composing goes, when did you begin writing songs and writing your own tunes?
Well, it was actually, I was doing covers for, I was with a group of musicians that were doing covers for music, otherwise known as the Environmental Channel. We call it
horror stories
the Environmental Channel, and not music. So, but music got cheap and quit. Didn't want to pay the fees to redo pop tunes. We did a ton of them, we do it like 65 to 70 in for one session, two times a year. And I don't even remember half the ones I did. And I had to transcribe the bass parts for almost every one of them, because in all those cases there weren't parts, and there was nobody to write them for you, rarely.
And this is like before music notation software, so it's a lot of pen and paper.
They give you a stack of stuff that was sheet music, but as you know, the sheet music is dumbed down to a certain key and makes it look nice on the staff. It's not anything to do with the recording, so they're absolutely worthless. So, but anyway, where was I getting back to? So writing. So that went away, but what they were doing was were writing originals. So I jumped in on this, and I started writing. So that's where a lot of the originals and the ideas and some of the ones I didn't use for music are. And what I found is Greta. She would go on one of her walks down at Erskine, and she would have a recorder, and she'd record melodies. She'd just sing melodies, and she'd come home, and I'd go through them, and I'd go, wait a minute, I could do. So Nasty Gnomes, Nasty Gnomes she started out as just a melody, or sometimes it might be a full form, but it also might be just an idea, or just a section melody. And I would find it harmonically and set it up, and then if I had to fill in the blanks, I would put it in here, and then say, can you do that? Is that going to work? Will that work? Is that what you had in mind? And all that stuff. And so we did a lot of co-writing on this, including Nasty being one of them. And she's added lyrics since then, so it's actually, the title now is About the Boy, which is much better than Nasty. It was actually Nasty Trolls, but they didn't. Even the music guys didn't even like that, and they didn't really care. They didn't really care about titles, but apparently, Trolls was out.
Well, and of course, the people that don't know, you're talking about Greta Matassa.
Yeah,
wonderful
Greta Matassa.
Vocalist.
Yeah.
Yes. Your better half, or
Yeah, that's my better half, that's for sure. But she was just brilliant at this coming up. I think there's still a ton of them on the recording things. But anyway, we had this. It was lucrative to get on there because the play at that time, it tanked, along with so much else on royalties. But the royalties were really, really good at that time. I mean, they were extraordinarily good. And then again, people got greedy, and they lost the lawsuit that caused them to repay back royalties, which is the thing kind of just bottomed out. They're still royalties, but they're not. They're in the two digits.
We're talking Spotify money here, maybe.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, which is like what 0.0000088, 0.003. It's whatever.
Yeah. Well, so when so you're in Seattle, you're playing, you're writing. At that time, let's talk about the early '80s in Seattle when you're here playing. So what was the scene like? Were there any musicians that you made a point to get out and see and hear? Any clubs that you like to enjoy going and playing and being around?
Yeah, when I was there, we played 6 nights at this. We'd play 6 nights at this top of this hotel called Ridpath. It's called Ankeny's. That was the name of the club. And but we played the off night at a place called the Tin Air, and then we managed to find. We always managed to find there was 2 people there. You know how there's some people that are just really good at finding places to play. There was a sax player that Gary Adegoffer that was actually good at finding rooms, and in one case he donated a grand piano to make the room happen. That was God, I don't know the name of that one, But I remember playing there with John Faddis and Peter Erskine. And that's so that because it was affiliated, he taught at the Spokane Falls Community College, and they had a jazz program, and they would have a jazz festival and hire, and we would back them. That's where I played with Micheal the first time, was through there. But there was a couple clubs. Hobart's was one, and that was a nice club. It was in the basement. It had all the atmosphere. Yeah. It would still be there, but again, the hotel sold, yeah. And the people who bought it, they didn't want anything to do with music. Zip, that was it. Yeah. But it wasn't for, and they had a number of clubs there. That there was another place called Ella's, really nice. It was again on the upper floor, and it operated in the black, but they had another thing where they were doing shows like plays, and that thing was like a bottomless pit. It just kind of took the jazz club with it, and didn't work financially. So, but there were lots. There were a number of clubs there, and like I said, in some cases when we'd play with them, they didn't always. Sometimes Mintzer was another one. Mintzer done, and we also played that Hobart's thing. So there were only ones that would have as part of the contract to play the later an after set after the concert. So, we had Freddie Hubbard, but that was just the concert. I think we backed Mal Waldron, and it's all through that school, through Spokane Falls.
What was it like, at Cornish, Hadley Callan was teaching there, and he has a lot of great stories about being in Freddie's band. Do you have any? I've heard other stories from people that worked as a sideman with Freddie, so are there any that you care to share live on camera?
Oh.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, it was, when that was mid-'80s.
We're talking about Freddie Hubbard, by the way. Yeah.
That was mid-'80s, and Freddie, of course, he was killing it. He was, but there was a few things we were reading that he had definitely took issue with, not in a harsh way. Yeah. So as far as the gig on stage stuff, he was cool. He was okay. Yeah. Off the stage, he was a party animal. At the time, there was certain requirements in the backstage. Anyway, the after-hour party was sideways, and then the dark side kind of showed up on that one. Yeah. So that was kind of I think that was a rough patch of things. It's odd. He would, for a while afterwards, he would call our pianist, and say, just randomly. And one time he called, and he said, "Hey, Danny, I have this new tune called Lemon Chicken." And he started singing it. Only didn't, lemon chicken, sweet and hot, something, and just kind of rambling on the phone. And Danny's up. It's late. It's like 2 in the morning. We're just sort of hanging out. Yeah. He's like holding the phone up. It's like Freddie Hubbard. He's singing. I was like, what? But he was. I found some photos the other day of that concert, but he was great, actually, and he corrected a few things. I still remember we were reading some things that were in the real book. Yeah. There's a couple of things he goes, that's not the right chord, especially on up jump spring. Yeah. There's something that was real. It was dead wrong in the first, in the original real book. But he was like, no, that's not the. This is the two chords, and that stuck with me. I was like, oh, that's much cooler. Why did I do? And we had a sax player, and he had him right on the stage with us because he was good. He was a good player. So, Steve Barenko. But yeah, but like I said, a list of who we've backed is pretty extensive.
Well, yeah, and I know you have I'm sure, tons of great stories. And even after the fact, because you still teach and play and tour and do tons of stuff. You work a lot with Greta. You've been working with her for many years now. And I know we're getting short on time. So if you have questions for Clipper, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll do my best to get to them. Can you talk a little bit, for a long time, we were discussing this last week when we had to bag this thing. But your association with Darren, the great pianist Darren Clendenin, great piano and writer, can you talk about your relationship with him musically?
Well, I can certainly feel the loss. It's not a day goes by that, you have 20-some, 20. I think I'd met him once when I briefly had moved to Portland in '90, and I think I played maybe one or two gigs, but I didn't really. Again, it's one of those things where I was a stranger, and anyone who was coming to the gig, it had rotating pianists, rotating personnel. So when I played with him, and I remember he was great and easy to play with, and very quiet. And then he had moved to Seattle, and I met him in '85, and he was playing a club down in Pioneer Square. I can't remember, almost remember the name of it, but that's where I met him. That's where I truly met him. And then Greta sort of, in the meantime, Greta had come up, and Greta had hired for a couple things, and then just sort of went, well, I'm just going to keep, I think I'll, and things just sort of clicked. But, so we had like this 20, since 95, since 95 with him. And we, what happens is you suddenly, all these standards that you play that you quit reading, all of a sudden, all of them have evolved to a certain set of changes, and it probably just keeps going. And I mean, there's so many things. I miss the guy every day, absolutely. It's I have to not make sure we're doing Skylark or whatever, and not to realize now the players, they're great and they have great ears and stuff, but to not go, not just start going automatic because this is what, or getting to like we do it this way.
You have a rapport with someone, and you're so used to doing it that same way, and all of a sudden it's different, and you don't want to box someone else in their creativity, and so it's a challenging thing when you have a different person playing the part that knows their language and their material and all the stuff.
Well, it's just that it's not, you have to kind of move on. You move on, but it's you can't. But you miss you miss all those years of things. You just and also just hanging out with, he's a great guy. He's just it's everything. And now he's in Portland, so we'll probably see him on Valentine's Day. He's gonna come down and play.
Come down or come up?
He's coming down, and we're actually going down there to see him at Wilf's, at the new restaurant. But I'm looking forward to seeing that, to seeing him. But
Can switching gears again? Can you talk a little bit, because you do a lot of teaching as well? Can you talk about your role as an educator and a teacher? Now you're at Pacific Lutheran University,
Yeah.
and what are you doing? Also private lessons and things, or
that's it. I am doing just just teaching jazz bass.
And you've been there for quite some time. How long have you been there now?
22 years.
Wow.
So that might be right, because I think I started around 90. So it might be on my 23rd year.
Who was the director of the jazz band? Was it Roger Guard still?
No, I was hired by David Joyner. Okay. I think Paul did his first year there. I think.
Paul Gabrielson?
Yeah. And then he couldn't do it yet the next, the following. So David called me. That's when I met him. And we've been doing a lot of that trio, and we did quite a bit of recording, so recently. You're on one of them.
That's right. Yes. As I was getting ready to leave today, I had a student show up at the house, and I'm like, oh God, because I'm trying to get the door, and I forgot to cancel because I had to do this, and we just get there's so many things that I'm juggling, just keeping like day to day what's going on, and then we've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old home. It's like without my phone and my calendar, it's nuts. I don't know what happened yesterday. I mean, the gigs just start like blurring together. So, and I'm sure it's probably similar with you too. I mean, you play all the time.
There are times. Yeah.
So, but PLU for 20 years, and so if someone wanted to study with you, would you be open to that for private lessons and things like that?
I have a studio. I just had a lesson with somebody who just got a new bass, and this last week. So for a while I wasn't seeing in person things, and I didn't get on the Zoom thing. I was doing a little of that in the college, but it's frustratingly.
Like we had today. Yeah, there's always
just, especially bass. Yeah. Bass just sounds terrible on some of those things, and it was compromising as far as, because if I was trying to it was a lesson where it involved me trying to figure out the sound, or even what they were playing. It was like, this is almost silly to try to teach this, but you're at a the instrument's has a singularly brings in a little more problems than others, I think. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised.
As far as projects, so steadfastly doing a ton of stuff with Greta Matassa's band, and then you also have your own group that you.
And I haven't done much with that since pandemic. And that's my. But the tool-list thing was the mainstay of that, and it was that was even their idea. I said they just got to wait. We're going to give you a night. What? You're going to bring your quartet. It's like, okay. And then it became steady, and that made it. But I haven't found a replacement for that. That's on me. But I'm still figuring out how to get that one back online, because we get to do a few instrumentals with Greta. She wants that, but it's not like But it'd be nice to find it'd be nice to get the quartet back in there.
And so that's you and Alexi, Brian Monroney, and Mark. Is that correct?
That would be and also interchangeably David Joyner. So there's a couple of interchangeable pieces. It's a little hard to keep track of right now. Is this and this? There's a bit of a rotation as far as harmonic instruments, whether it's guitar or piano.
Well, then, and you said you also play with David's trio, so David Deacon Joyner's trio, Dr. David Deacon Joyner.
Right, doctor.
So besides those groups, are there any other things any projects you're working on, or?
Well, they played this yesterday. They played this on the Jim Wilkie.
Okay. Jazz Northwest.
And it's they played Rapture off this.
Okay.
Harold Lamb. But anyway, we're on this. This is David Lee Joyner, and this is with Paul and Small.
Oh, that's Pete Chrislieb
Chris
and
Lieb
yeah,
and
and Linda. Yes,
Linda.
yes.
So that was fun to do. It was it's kind of a culmination of something that happened during pandemic, where we got together. We go over there, Mark and David and me, and started just playing jam, just like a sanity thing, just to get out of the house.
Yeah.
So what happened is that David started writing arrangements, and pretty soon we had a whole album of arrangements. Yeah. And so Pete said, "Just let's go to the studio, let's do it." So that was another one that was done about somewhere near when David was doing his, but it was kind of it actually, I think it kind of saved our heads, I think, because just doing that and having something creative going on instead of just being holed up and ugh. So
Well, it seems like it seems like things are opening up. I mean, there's more performances and things happening, which is good. I mean, it seems like looking at social media and stuff that you're gigging and doing more stuff. I mean, particularly like working with Greta stuff. I mean, she's a workhorse. She's gigging everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still not back, but it's mainly I think it's probably just needs me. I just need to be out, get out of the house once in a while and just show up. Yeah. It's, I think some of the to get the networking thing, which is always fairly delicate. It has to be kind of delicately done instead of going, "Are you a bass player? Why don't you call me?" That doesn't work. But I was thinking of the Jack Sheldon things where the guy comes up and goes, "You guys know anything slow?" He goes, "Yeah, January, February." Yeah.
Well, I'm keeping an eye on the comments here, and normally someone else is monitoring the computer here. So if there's comments that I missed, them questions, my apologies. We'll do our best to get to them. We need to wrap up here.
No.
So in the last remaining moments here, I'd like to ask all the guests this question: if someone was thinking about becoming a musician and taking that on, what are some things that you found, some advice or information that you found very, very helpful in you and your own personal development and growth that you think would be important to pass on to them?
Wow. Don't get discouraged, and is and like I said, I think just even if you don't play, show up some places. It is good, but nothing replaces just listening to jazz. Just if you're not, figure out how much percentage you are or not, because it makes a huge difference in how much you listen to jazz or whatever. And it's so easy to do now. Yeah. It's so much easier than it's just you pick your media. So.
Wonderful. Well, Clipper, thank you so much for being our guest today. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Sorry about the sound issues, but at least we got it to work this week, so thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you for moving that.
Of course. Thank you to all of our viewers for joining us either in real time as we're doing this or after the fact. And as I said, if you think of questions later, feel free to jump in and put them in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to them. And thank you for supporting us. If you want to make a monetary donation to help what we do, that'd be great. As I mentioned earlier, all the stuff, for the most part, 90% of what we do throughout the year is 100% free and open to the public and all ages, whether it's online or in person. We also have classes and international exchanges and things that we do, and of course the composing tunes and all that kind of stuff. So, but you can make a donation via Venmo or PayPal or mailing a check, and all that information is at the beginning of this. And of course, thank you to our sponsors. Again, that's Ted Brown Music, KNKX, Titus Will Cars, Tacoma Creates, and Edward Jones Financial Consultant Rick Gray. Let's see, what else I want to tell you. We're doing our weekly jam session tonight at McMiniman, so feel free to come check that out. And as I mentioned yesterday, we've got a wonderful celebration of Bill Ramsey, he's still alive. He hasn't passed away. We want to actually do a concert in his honor while he's still with us. So that's the first Sunday in April. So mark your calendars. That's at the Spanish Ballroom in Tacoma. It's absolutely free. The Pony Boy All-Star Big Band will be performing. Bill Ramsey will be performing. So that'll be great if you can join us. And other than that, we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much for joining us.